You pick up the salt shaker, sprinkle a little on your plate. Nobody thinks twice about it. But picture this. That same pinch of salt, 8,000 years ago, could trade ounce for ounce with gold. Not a metaphor, a documented exchange rate. So what exactly did this cheap kitchen staple have going for it that made entire civilizations price it against the most valuable metal on Earth? Your body cannot function without it. Sodium isn't a nice to have. It's non-negotiable. Your heart beats because of it. Your nerves fire because of it. Go without it for a few days and your body starts shutting down for real. The problem is, for the first 300,000 years of our existence, humans had no reliable way to find salt, store it, or carry it with them. No mines, no containers. Just a body that constantly demanded it, and a planet that hid it in places nobody could predict. The first lesson came from animals. Before humans figured out how to find salt, they watched wildlife do it. Elephants in Kenya will walk 40 kilometers just to chip salt deposits out of caves on Mount Elgon. Gorillas in Congo eat riverbank clay for its minerals. Our ancestors saw this and copied it. Follow the herds, go where they go, eat what they eat. Sounds simple, but that was humanity's first real system for locating a resource. But this method had a fatal flaw. Salt isn't spread evenly across the planet. Ironically, the East African Rift Valley, where humans evolved, is a sodium-poor region. Anthropologist Timothy Johns at McGill University spent years studying this, and his conclusion was that this wasn't some sudden crisis. It was a slow-burning pressure grinding on the human body for tens of thousands of years. Finding salt didn't mean keeping it to yourself. In 2009, anthropologist Sarah Blaffer Hurtado at UC Davis published a striking finding. In hunter-gatherer communities, rare and valuable resources, honey, animal fat, minerals, got shared far more widely than common ones. Whoever found a salt deposit didn't hoard it. It instantly became communal property, because the group's survival depended on everyone having enough sodium, not just the person who found it. One afternoon, 100,000 years ago, Ethiopia, roughly 100,000 years ago, a group of 25 people is tracking a dried-up riverbed, pushed there by drought that scattered the herds. Their guide is a woman who's passed through this spot twice before in her life. She remembers the bend where the ground leaves behind a strange white film after it dries. The group stops, scrapes at the earth with flat stones and bare hands, and eats it right there on the spot. Bitter, harsh, nothing like refined salt today. But the body responds almost instantly. They stay 2 days, then move on. The deposit is small. It's running out. Not everyone had to dig for it. The Hadza in Tanzania took a different route. They got most of their sodium from the organs of freshly killed animals, eating liver while it was still warm. Anthropologist Frank Marlowe at Cambridge University, who lived with the tribe for years, documented that their seasonal, protein-heavy diet kept them fully stocked on sodium without a single grain of added salt, a number that caught science's attention. Anthropologist Richard Lee at the University of Toronto studied the Kung San of the Kalahari through the 1960s and 70s and measured something remarkable. They averaged 690 milligrams of sodium a day, entirely from natural food, with zero added salt. The wild part? That number nearly matches what today's cardiologists recommend for a healthy heart. Our ancestors were hitting modern medical targets tens of thousands of years ago, with no research, no guidelines. Just a naturally balanced diet. Hold on to that number, 690 milligrams. It matters later when we look at why it's basically vanished from the modern plate. The turning point? Humans learned to make their own salt. Before agriculture flipped everything upside down, there was another major shift. The moment humans stopped just searching for salt and started manufacturing it themselves. An archaeological find that surprised a lot of people. In 2011, archaeologist Olivier Weller from France's National Center for Scientific Research published findings from Lunca in the Nimes region of northeastern Romania. The site had pottery vessels, fire pits, and structures dating back to around 6000 BC, roughly 8,000 years ago. This wasn't someone stumbling onto a mineral deposit. This was a full-blown production process. The truly unexpected part? This was farmers, not an empire. What really caught researchers off guard was that Lunca belonged to no civilization at all. No cities, no writing, no government. Just Neolithic farmers who'd only recently given up a nomadic life. and yet they were running a system large enough to leave a clear archaeological footprint. Hundreds of broken pottery shards litter the site, the result of boiling salt water for hours on end, over and over. Vessels cracked, they made new ones. Cracked again, made more. Nobody stopped the process. Salt started traveling 8,000 years ago. Scientists analyzed the chemical signature at sites up to 100 kilometers from Lunka and found the same mineral trace from that same spring. In other words, this salt was being carried and traded across a fairly wide range. No way that happens by accident. Salt became a tradable commodity before humans even worked with copper, before writing, before a single empire ever existed. 3 continents, no contact with each other, same answer. Lunka wasn't a one-off. At the Yuncheng Salt Lake in Shanxi Province, China, researchers found evidence of organized extraction dating to roughly the same period, around 6000 BC, completely independent of what was happening in Romania. And on the coast of Peru, in the Chilca Valley, archaeologist David Goldstein documented clay basins used to concentrate seawater, dating to around 5000 BC. 3 continents, 0 contact, arriving at the same solution within less than 1,000 years of each other. The common cause was agriculture. When the same behavior pops up independently in multiple places at once, that's usually not coincidence. It's a sign that something in the environment shifted everywhere at the same time. And that's exactly what happened. Agriculture had just taken hold. Humans shifted to diets built around wheat, barley, millet, rice. The problem is domesticated grains contain almost no sodium. Sodium intake collapsed across the entire species, all at once, everywhere. The proof is written into the bones. In 1977, anthropologist Mark Nathan Cohen of SUNY Plattsburgh published a study comparing human remains before and after the shift to agriculture. The result was almost backward from what you'd expect. The first farmers were weaker than their hunter-gatherer ancestors. Shorter, more dental disease, skeletons showing clear signs of malnutrition. Agriculture gave humans more food, but it also broke their bodies down. Whoever controlled salt, controlled power. This is the real root of why salt became so valuable. Not because it tasted good. Because agriculture turned sodium deficiency into the new normal. And once that happened, whoever controlled the supply controlled whether an entire community lived or died. This is arguably the first form of economic power in human history. One morning at Lunka, 8,000 years ago, a group carries heavy clay vessels down to the stream, fills them with brine, builds a fire, and tends it for hours straight. A vessel cracks from thermal shock. They build another one immediately. Nobody stops. Once the water fully evaporates, a layer of white crystals is left behind. They scrape it out carefully, wrap it in leaves and animal hide. Some stays with them. The rest travels farther than anyone in that group will ever go themselves. That was the start of global trade. Humans once traded nutrient-rich organ meat from wild animals for fields of grain, and in doing so, accidentally triggered a global sodium crisis. 8,000 years later, we're still, in a sense, running a non-stop effort to fix the fallout from that one invention, agriculture. Salt left its mark on language and power alike. Roman soldiers were partly paid in salt. That's literally where the word salary comes from. The ancient Egyptians embalmed bodies with natron, a sodium compound, because they believed salt was the foundation of preservation itself. The trade routes that crossed the Sahara, linking sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean, were built almost entirely around this one need, the peak, salt worth its weight in gold. Literally. In the 14th and 15th centuries, the Timbuktu salt trade moved massive slabs of Saharan rock salt, called taglamt, mined at Tagaza in modern-day Mali, across thousands of kilometers of desert to trade for gold, sometimes at a 1-to-1 weight ratio. Sounds insane. But in a world built on agriculture, far from the ocean, far from mineral deposits, salt kept you alive. Gold couldn't do that. Salt became a political weapon. Whoever controlled salt essentially controlled the population. In 18th century France, the salt tax, known as the gabelle, was one of the most hated tools of royal oppression, enforced with brutal unfairness, and became one of the sparks that helped ignite the French Revolution. And in India in 1930, Gandhi's Salt March wasn't a protest about seasoning. It was a protest against a colonial government daring to tax the one thing billions of human bodies literally cannot survive without. Then it all collapsed. In a good way. Industrialization arrived and blew up the entire old system. industrial evaporation, mechanized mining, global shipping. In roughly 150 years, from the mid-1800s to the mid-1900s, salt went from a strategic global commodity to one of the cheapest things on the planet. Today, a kilogram of salt costs less than a cup of coffee. But the craving never went away. Scarcity ended a long time ago. Your biology never got the memo. Your nervous system, kidneys, and cardiovascular system are still calibrated for about 700 milligrams a day, the exact level our hunter-gatherer ancestors naturally hit. Meanwhile, the average modern American consumes around 3,400 milligrams a day, nearly 5 times as much, and most of it is already baked into food before you ever touch it. Why salty food feels so satisfying. In 2011, neuroscientist Wolfgang Loescher at the University of Veterinary Medicine Hanover published a fascinating study. Sodium deprivation activates the same reward pathway in the brain as addictive substances, flooding the nucleus accumbens with dopamine the moment the body finally gets sodium. That satisfaction you feel eating something salty isn't in your head. It's a real neurochemical response, hardwired for a world that doesn't exist anymore. You're running old software on modern hardware. Your brain is still doing exactly what it was built to do: hunt for sodium, reward you when you find it, and never shut the alarm off. Because for 300,000 years, shutting that alarm off meant death. That salt shaker sitting on your table is, in a very real sense, the finish line of a search that lasted nearly 1/3 years. And here's the thing worth sitting with. Somewhere in Romania, 8,000 years ago, someone sat scraping white crystals out of a cracked clay pot with their bare fingernails. They were solving the same problem your body solves every time you reach for the salt shaker today. They just paid a far steeper price for the same answer. The scarcity disappeared a long time ago. The instinct never did. This is exactly the kind of story this channel digs into every week, decoding human behavior by tracing ancient instinct straight into the modern world. Hit subscribe if you want more of this. It costs you nothing, but it tells the algorithm to push this kind of content further. See you in the next one.